Hi everyone, Janelle here, your relationship coach. I am here with my good friend, Julie Friedman-Smith. She is a parenting expert. And today we're talking about kids and the impact on children when your relationship is on the rocks. You know, you're in that middle of tension, there might be things going on. You know, how do you empower your children and not them be affected, whether that's presently or in the future, based on what's going on right now? So welcome, Julie.
Thank you. Looking forward to having this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, you know, most of my clients and the people that follow me are parents. And so I thought this was a really great topic because a lot of people who do come to me are, you know, dealing they're dealing with issues in the relationship. But when we get underneath it, what's really, you know, not working is the actual relationship inside of a parenting, you know, scenario or, you know, a difference of parenting styles. So I would love for you to just share a little bit about like who you are, what you do, and, you know, maybe just start us off on this topic.
Absolutely. So again, my name is Julie Friedman-Smith. I help parents find their voice. So I've been helping parents for over 20 years, and I work with parents, I work with families, and in three main ways. I help with tactical parenting issues. So those are the little things that don't take very long. Things like, you know, my baby is screaming from their high chair. How do I make the screaming stop? Or my child will not stay in their bed. My 3-year-old is climbing out of his big boy bed. Those kinds of things. So tactical issues. I talk about practical issues, which are kind of the longer term parenting things. So how do we build self-esteem in our kids? How do we teach our kids values, and how do we do things over the long term? And then the personal things, because so much of what we're doing as parents is learning about ourselves. There are all sorts of emotional reactions that we have as we're going through these things. And so I support parents in shifting their mindset around the fact that their kids aren't doing things to them, they're just things that are happening, and how they can shift the way they're looking at it so they can bring their best selves to their parenting. Nobody's ever done this before. Just like in a relationship, it's all brand new. We're working on things as best we can. And so having some strategies, having a different way to perceive it can really make a big difference. And I've been lucky enough to be working with families for over 20 years, and it's a real gift. And a lot of the families that I work with are families who are struggling either because of different ways of parenting. And so they're fighting with each other because they don't like the way that parenting is working. Or I'm talking with families who are restructuring. So they're on the verge of telling their kids that they're going to separate or divorce, or they've now made that change, and the parents are living in different homes. And how do they balance that? And how do they work together? Or if the other parent isn't willing to work together, how do they take charge of their own household and support their kids through it?
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, we were just talking before we started about blended families. I get that that's probably another level of
such a huge challenge. Yeah. And in so many, especially in blended families, the most interesting thing to me about a blended family, which is easy for me to say because I am not in one, but having worked with so many families around it and done a lot of research on it, is that the interactions that are happening are about the roles in which the people find themselves, not about the actual person. So it's when the step parent is coming in, it's not about that person and whether they're a good person or not. It's the fact that that person has now put themselves into this new role. And somehow there are jealousies around that role, and there are discomfort and shame. And so anyway, it's really about roles. And I do a lot of work with families, step families, just about how to distance ourselves from the roles and realize it's not personal, and also to see that these things are expected. All of these bumps in the roads are expected, so we know they're coming. How can we manage them as best we can?
I love that. I mean, everything that you're saying, you know, totally aligns in the work that I do too with marriage. It's like, you know, sitting down, having conversations about what the expectations are, what the values are, getting aligned, and respecting that we are different, and that's okay. And, you know, and I think making sure that the intention and the commitment is the same. So as long as we both want the same thing, then how we go about it, you know, even though if it is different, we're taking totally two different routes. I'm taking the highway and you're taking the side street. As long as we end up in the same place, perhaps then they don't feel like they're on such opposite sides, and they can actually come together as a partnership. Because at the end of the day, you know, I think a lot of parents forget that how they speak and treat each other as partners, the kids are watching.
Oh, the kids are watching, right? Especially when you think they're not. That's when they're really watching.
Yeah, and even if they're not communicating, I tell my clients to, like, they can feel it. They're not stupid. They can tell there's something going on. Even if you're not arguing in front of them, they can feel it.
Definitely.
Yeah. So what would you say are like some of the common, you know, you obviously run into this way more than I do. Like, what are some of the common challenges and also common mistakes that you see where, you know, parents are like, you know, hitting a wall and they just keep trying to push this wall down and it's like, it's not moving. Yeah, because you're trying to push down the wrong wall. Can you share a little bit about about that?
Yeah, well, I think the thing that you just mentioned is really key. This idea that, okay, we're going to keep having our arguments, but we're going to pretend in front of the children that everything's just fine.
Mm.
The kids know it's not fine. And young kids know it's not fine. They can feel it. And of course, if they're really, really little, they're not knowing what's wrong, but they can feel that something's wrong. And so it's hard to do because when we're in a period of crisis as adults, it's really hard to pull ourselves out of that crisis and say, okay, how can I be a responsible parent during this time? Because that requires a logic brain. And if your emotional brain is in control, then that's tricky. However, I think, especially if this is a long-term thing, or if this is something that you're arguing about that's come along and it's going to be there for a little bit, and you suddenly realize, oh man, I hope our relationship is going to survive this. But in the meantime, we're going over these bumpy roads. How do we best support our kids through this? And my recommendation would be to be honest with yourselves about that, and then find a way to be honest with our kids. Which doesn't mean telling our kids a bunch of adult information that they don't need to handle.
Yes.
Because it's not their responsibility. But it does mean stop pretending that everything's okay. Because then you're teaching your kids about if you're modeling dishonesty and you're modeling that when something's not okay, we don't talk about it. Everybody just keeps it to ourselves. And if as parents, you're trying to instill in your kids that you want them to come to you when there's a problem, they need to know that, oh, that's what we do in this family. So my recommendation might be, and again, it would depend on the age of the kids, but just to say to the children, the two of us, I don't want to say mom and dad, because sometimes it's mom and mom and sometimes it's dad and dad. So your parents are having some struggles. We're disagreeing with each other, or we're having a bumpy road right now in our relationship. And what we want to tell you is that sometimes we're feeling sad and sometimes we're feeling scared. And you guys might be feeling that too. And that no matter what happens, we can handle it. Like we all love each other. We might not like each other right now, but we love each other and we're okay to handle it. So if you're feeling scared or if you're feeling upset, you can come and tell me. And I might cry in front of you, and I'm okay. And it's not your job to fix me, but sometimes these emotions just need to come out. And you can say things like, here's how we're working on it, or we've asked some other adults to give us some help to work through this. So we're trying to do our best to work on this. And we just want to let you know things are not absolutely perfect and sunshiny. That's okay, because things go up and down in life, and we can be strong and we can work through this. Now, some parents don't want to do that because then they feel for their kids. They're coming up with all these questions of, but are you going to break up? Is somebody going to move out? Are you mad at me? Did I do it? Blah, blah, blah. The reality is these questions are coming up for the kids anyway. If they're constantly hearing their parents fighting, if people are slamming doors, if people are mistreating each other, and it might not be like that. It might just be that there's arguments happening and then people saying nothing to each other. The kids are still questioning that. So in my mind, and this is one person's opinion, although I mean, I have some background in it. If we can find the courage to open up for those questions, then the kids can ask us. But the next step around that is, don't promise anything that you can't live up to. So if your question is, if the question is, are you going to split up? Is daddy going to leave? Is mommy going to leave? And you don't know, you can say, that feels like a scary question. I don't have an answer for you, but I can tell you we're working really hard to make our family be as safe as possible. So it's really important that you don't lie, because if you promise that you're going to stay together and then you don't stay together, then your kids, in addition to having the foundation of the family crumble, you also lied to them. And so then they can't trust you. So my recommendation is always, and this is in any aspect of parenting, regardless of whether it's about relationships or anything, if you can't answer the question honestly, then it's okay to say, I'm really not sure what the answer to that question is. I need to think about it. I'll let you know. Or we're doing the best we can. We're trying to find a way to do that. And I know that feels scary, and I love you. And it's okay if you feel sad or scared about that. And we're going to do the best we can. Because promising kids things and then not keeping up the promise is quite harmful.
Yeah, I can hear. And really what I'm getting in this conversation is that, I think we need to give our kids credit that they're a lot smarter than we think we are, that they are. And they're a lot more observant and intuitive. And, they think that just because they hide behind the door when they argue, or that they don't argue verbally in front of them, that they have no clue.
So it's important for kids to know that their day-to-day reality is covered. So whether you're in the process of actually splitting up or separating and somebody's moving out of the house, or you're moving to a different house, whatever it is, whenever you're breaking bad news to kids, the bottom line for them are the facts. Here's where dinner's coming from. Here's how you're going to get to your choir practice. you're going to sleep here, or there will be a bed for you in each house. So, when you wake up in the morning, I'll still be making you breakfast. Those kinds of things. That's what a child's life is made up of, is these events that happen in their daily routine. And so the more consistency we can provide them, and the more reassurance we can provide them that that daily routine is going to change, the feelings might be going up and down, but the routine is going to be there, then we provide, again, a solid foundation for our kids.
I have a question.
Yeah.
When do you know, or when do you need to start thinking about, you've got this child who's acting up? I'm thinking about my own family. When I was 9, my parents split up for 4 years. And I remember I was 9, my sister was 6, 7 years old. And it was really hard for us. And, trying to figure out, I know I created a whole bunch of stories around, like, I don't trust people I love will leave me. How do you know when it's the point where you're like, okay, this is not normal, like we need to get a counselor or a therapist involved? Or how do you know when it's time to, like, get added support, would you say?
Well, what my standard answer for that has always been is, when someone is unable to function in their daily life, that's a sign. So,
like, for example, school, let's say they all of a sudden are like this was my sister. She's just started to, like, not pay attention in school.
Yeah, exactly. And so when it's those moments where, because we can all go through challenging times and have the odd day where things aren't, I just didn't make it on time, but if you have people who can't get out of bed to go to school, or their marks were here and suddenly their marks are here, and it's not because it's algebra, it's because, something's happening. There's an indication. So we want to be aware of these changes in comportment. That's such a weird word. I don't even know why I said it. We want to be aware of these changes in a typical daily routine for our child. So if they suddenly become very sullen and withdrawn, or, as you mentioned, schoolwork goes out the window, or they're not playing with their friends anymore, they don't want to go anywhere, those kinds of things are really good indicators. And what's interesting is that right now, in this pre-COVID or post-COVID, or we're still kind of in COVID, but in this time, there's so many mental health struggles. There's such a backup that it's tricky to get in and see someone. But a good place to start always when those kinds of things happen is just to go to the family doctor, even to start asking for just a physical, to make sure that everything's physiologically okay with the child. And then while you're there, you can also be talking with the doctor, or give the doctor a note if you don't want to say it in front of your child, leave a note so that you can get some resources, referral resources that way. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I find too, is like the children are sometimes caught in this hard spot where it's like they feel like they're kind of caught between two places. And, I actually had a lady call me and said, the reason I'm calling you is, we want to fix our marriage. And why I'm calling you today is, my 13-year-old just told me that she never wants to get married at 13. And she's like, that really worries me. And I'm like, yeah. And, and even thinking about my current clients right now, I would say 99, if not 100% of them have mommy daddy issues. And so when I meet with couples and, they're oftentimes one person wants to work on the relationship and the other one isn't so keen on it, I remind them, you guys, this is not just about the two of you. This is so much bigger than the two of you. This is, your kids are watching and they're going to pick up all the behaviors and the habits that you guys have. If you stonewall, if you yell at each other, if you're disrespectful, they're gonna take that in and they're gonna repeat what they know, even though they know it's not right. We knew when we watched our parents how they were acting weren't right, but yet we don't know any other way to be because that's all we were shown. We were models when we were kids. And so, I think that's why I'm so passionate about talking about this topic in kids. Like, yeah, of course we want marriage to work, but the reason to work on it and to do the hard stuff, especially the inner work, isn't just about two people staying in the same house. It's generational.
Absolutely. The repercussions are definitely generational. and we can be aware that we're only working with what we were given, right? So there is this hierarchical, or not hierarchical, inheritance of relationship tools and strategies. And so, yeah, there is value in that, because I'm just trying to remember of who said it, but a quote that I love is, don't be afraid that your kids aren't listening to you. Be afraid that they're watching everything that you do, because that's really what it is, right? Like, our words are part of it, but our actions are so much more. Actions speak louder than words. We often hear that. And so if this is a pattern of behavior, if this is what relationships look like to our kids, we need to remember that they're just seeing our relationship with blinders on, right? They're not seeing a bunch of different relationships. They're seeing one relationship. And so it can really have an impact on how they respond in relationships as well. Now, it's not the only thing. I mean, there are other relationships in their world. They're seeing their teachers interact, they're seeing their aunts and uncles, or maybe their grandparents. But I think it's valuable to learn how to argue well. Like I love what you do, because absolutely in relationships, there's going to be conflict in romantic relationships and in friendship relationships too, right? Our kids are experiencing that all the time. We're experiencing that all the time. Conflict is normal. And so our goal really is to figure out the respectful way to resolve conflict, or the respectful way to exist, even if we can't resolve that particular conflict. And so your work really allows people to do that. And in modeling that for the kids, that's how the kids can learn how to be in a good relationship. But yeah, we really do have an impact on our kids and their future relationships. And that might be the selling point. If you weren't willing to do it for yourself, would you be willing to do it for your kids? I think is a really good thing to consider.
Yeah. And, a lot of the couples I work with too, they blame their parents, even though, their parents didn't have perhaps a choice in the matter, at least in their eyes, that, we had to split up. It wasn't working. But I think they felt really resentful that their parents really didn't take their own feeling and experience for them as a child into consideration when they were made. At least that's how it's occurring for them. And so they have this like unseated incompleteness with their parents, because they feel like, you messed me up. And of course, the parents only do what they can do with what they know.
We're all doing the best we can. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And so there's this element all the way along. And I hear it is, okay, because what you just said is really resonating for me. And it's a big thing I'm trying to get into a small amount of.
Yeah, all good.
Drama in a relationship takes place because of an imbalance of responsibility. Some people are not taking enough responsibility. It's not my fault. He's being a jerk. I can't help it. It's not my fault. And some people are taking too much responsibility. I'll look after everything. I know you don't like that. I'll fix this. And whenever we have this imbalance of responsibility, we have drama. And so the only way out of drama is for each person to take responsibility for their own stuff. So part of our job as parents, part of our job as humans, in my belief, is that we take responsibility for our own stuff. Yes, there might be things that happen to us ahead of time. And there's no question that what we experienced as children has an impact on our brain development and the resources that we have and the skills and capacity we have for handling stress. The research has proven that. At the same time, if we have the skills at all to be able to say, knowing that happened, now I'm going to take this responsibility stepping forward, then we can start to pull ourselves a little bit out of the drama. It's not that there won't be big emotion. It's not that it will be easy. And so that's where I feel like parents have an opportunity, and some might say an obligation, to take responsibility for where they are right now and decide that they're going to own their stuff and start to make changes so that they don't pour that onto their children. Easier said than done.
I was just going to say that. I was going to say, wow, it sounds so simple. And what came up in my head as you were talking, I was like, can we talk about guilt for a second?
Amen. Yes, let's talk about it.
Because I feel like, and not even just as a parent, but even just as a human being, sometimes we want to take responsibility for things, but we have it like, I have a different context of what responsibility is. My context of responsibility is the ability to respond. But most people think about responsibility as blame, fault, wrong.
Oh, interesting. No, I'm with you. Yeah. What can I do? How do I manage the situation now? How do we step forward? Yeah.
Yeah. And I think and I think that a lot of people who, there's a part of them like they know they should take responsibility. It's like, I know I'm being a jerk, or I'm being difficult, or I'm not being a team player. But then guilt keeps them from actually getting themselves out of that disempowered state into a place where they can respond positively.
Yeah, absolutely.
Go ahead.
What were you going to say?
I was going to say, how do you coach parents when they're in that space of just this, like, they're like circling the drain of guilt?
Love it.
Can't quite get out of it.
So parenting guilt is huge. If you talk to parents of this generation, they will tell you they have guilt. And what I have found fascinating over the last 20 years is that they have guilt for incredibly interesting things. For instance, if you talk to a parent who needs to work all summer, so they have to send their kids to camp all summer, they feel super guilty that they have to send their kids to camp all summer. And then you talk to another parent who can't afford to send their kids to camp all summer because they aren't working and they keep their kids home all summer, and they feel really guilty that they haven't sent their kids to camp. Two exact opposite things. So what is guilt? So when I talk with parents about guilt is the distance between the expectations we have and the reality we live. And if your expectations are up here and your reality is down here, you got a lot of guilt. And so there are a number of ways we can deal with that. We can either lower our expectations or raise our reality, change our reality, or a little bit of both, which I think is the easiest, is to just do a little bit of both.
Okay.
Because guilt gets in the way. As you said, it causes you to freeze and not do anything. But it also, in a parenting perspective, it leads to pampered parenting. Like if you're feeling guilty about something, you're probably going to give in.
Yes.
You probably will be like, oh, it wasn't their fault that they're misbehaving. I'll let that go.
Right.
Oh, I should probably buy them a treat. I'm feeling really guilty about this. I'll buy them something. So there's a lot of bad parenting choices that are made in the as you're circling that drain of guilt. So guilt is a self-imposed emotion. We have control over it, and we can choose to spend a lot of time there, or we can say, okay, I'm going to spend a piece of time here. Then what am I going to do about it? Is my expectation too high in terms of parenting? And I would also question about in terms of relationships. Most of the expectations we have are created a long time before we are actually in the relationship or being a parent.
Yes.
I'm going to be the perfect parent. My kids are never going to be mad at me. I'm going to be kind all the time. I'm never going to yell. I'm going to be patient. Yeah, that's not
I'm going to be super mom or super dad.
And same in a relationship, right? We're going to have this loving relationship. It's going to be hugely passionate all the time. Our sex life is never going to go down the hill. Like, yeah. No, that's not a thing. But in our minds and in the fairy tales we've been told and the movies we've watched and the TV shows we've watched and the videos and the music,
social media.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Oh, don't even get me started. So yeah. So our expectations are super high. And yeah, social media is so true because we think everybody else is having a perfect life. They're not. They're so not. But anyway, then our reality is way lower than that expectation. And it might be okay. Our reality might not be that bad. So can we bring our expectations into line? Can we realize that, yeah, sometimes I'm not going to be very helpful as a parent, but I want to make sure that 2 days out of every 7, I'm playing around outside with my kids. Okay, well, that might not be the 7 out of every 7 you wanted, but if 2 out of 7 is realistic, can we shift that expectation down? Because then we won't be feeling so guilty. And can we start at 2 and maybe work our way up to 4? Or family dinners is another one of those things. There's so much research around the family dinner and how valuable it is for our kids' development and for our families as a whole. But for some families, it's not realistic to do that every night of the week. But could we do it 1 night a week? Or could we do it 3 nights a week? Can we put the phones away? Can we have the devices not at the table? It's these baby steps that are going to get us out of the guilt. But we have to stare the guilt in the face. And then, as you say, the ability to respond. What are we going to do about it? Let's put a plan in place. And then we can move forward. A lot of what I do with families also is help them make that plan, but then also help them to know how to talk about it. And when things don't go the way they planned, instead of exploding all over the kids, having words that are respectful in order to make the solution work better. It doesn't work 100% of the time, but it's nice to know what you're going to say, because then you're not scrambling for words. You're like, oh yeah, I knew this was a possibility. Here's what I'm supposed to say now.
Yeah. As you were talking, what the word kept coming up in my mind was the word comparison. Was like how we compare, like, again, not even necessarily parenting, but even in marriages or relationships. It's like, well, I'm comparing myself to what I think it should be, or my ex relationship, or how I have a client right now who he really struggles with guilt around being a dad, and he compares himself to his dad, who in his memory was like the perfect dad. But when I talk to his wife, he's like, his dad was not perfect. But he compares himself to this yardstick that it's not you can't compare. But I think that's when you're talking about expectation, I think we forget that, when we compare ourselves to something, we're 9 out of 10 times not going to be enough. And that just reiterates that thought that we have, that we're not enough, or we're not good enough, or smart enough, or whatever enough. So when you're talking
as you're saying that, for me, the image that comes into my head, and it's a meme, but I'll try to explain it better than a meme, is 2 ladders side by side, one with the rungs spaced very far apart, and one with teeny rungs, many rungs. And so if we're trying to grab for that first rung, which is just out of our reach, to pull ourselves up, to minimize that comparison, or to lower the expectations, or to meet our expectations, but the rung is too high for us to grab, then we're not even going to make it. But if we can just take 1 step closer, if we can use those rungs that are really close together, take 1 step closer to meeting those expectations, to living up to, instead of the pie in the sky of my dad was a perfect dad, well, let's bring this into reality here. What was one thing that you loved about your dad that he did? Well, I love the way he always took us bike riding on Sundays. Awesome. Can we work that out? And if we can't, can we do 1 Sunday bike ride a month? How can we have these tiny rungs where we're slowly building up, so that we can feel better about what we're doing, instead of being so far away that there's no way we can get there?
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's actually a really great analogy, because I think we make things a lot harder for ourselves than they really need to be oftentimes, when it's like, oh, have you thought about doing it slightly differently? Not exactly how your parents did it, but maybe a version that's kind of like that, but maybe it's your own thing.
Because we're our own people. We're our own people, and we're with different kids.
Yeah.
It's very easy for a dad to look good. I won't even say, I'm just taking your client's example, but it's very easy as a child to have a picture of what somebody was like. But what we don't see potentially is that 95% of the time that dad was at the office, and the 5% of the time when he was there, he was being a great dad. But the rest of the time, the mom was running around like a crazy woman trying to get everything done for the 5 minutes that the dad was home. That may not be the case, but it's also quite possible that it was. And these visions that we have of the way it was when we were children, we're all being taken in by a very young camera, a very young perspective. So sometimes we have to kind of pull the camera back and see the whole picture. Yeah,
absolutely. Julie, this conversation was so awesome. I didn't know where it was going to go. And it was just like, we just like poo. And we just like, we had a whole bunch of stuff in like 30 minutes and it was really great. So thank you for that. Any last words, advice, sort of parting words that you want to leave with the parents that have made it this far with us in this interview?
Yeah, I have one thing to share. Shut your mouth.
Ditto. That's what I mean, what people do.
So sometimes parents, like, if something's going wrong with the relationship, oh my God, your dad's doing this and I'm doing this and I've tried to do this, but he won't do this. And then we had this argument. It's not their business. It's not their business. And so anytime we go to tell kids something, we answer their question and then we shut our mouths. And that might be enough for them. Even if you just give a tiny answer. And then if they ask some more, you could say, oh, that's an interesting question. And then a great response is, what do you think? And then your kids can tell you what they think. And then you can respond to their concerns. So I guess don't puke all the information all over your kids. Do it in measured amounts and just give them the minimum information they need, because you probably, especially if you've got very verbal children, you probably just want to talk it out and reason with them and show them that we're really good people. And no. Be the adult, let them be the kids, tell them what they need to know, and then stop. If they want to know more, they'll ask. And then, as I said earlier, be honest in your answers, but give short answers. Do not overtalk.
On that note, how about these parents who like to share how they feel about the partner that they don't love so much? Like they're actually like almost trying to get the child on their side.
Oh yeah, no.
Like they're bad-mouthing their dad or bad-mouthing the mom.
Yeah, no. 100% no. Our job is to allow our kids to love both parents the same. That's our job. So we don't, if there's an abusive parent who's pummeling somebody against a wall or something, that's different. But in the day-to-day relationship battles, and even in the separations and divorces, what happens between the parents and their relationship has nothing to do with the relationship of the child and that parent, hopefully. And so our job is to allow the child, support the child in loving each parent equally. The child won't be able to do that. They will feel they need to take sides. They will try to protect both parents. But our job as parents is to allow them to love that person. And we can even say that. Daddy and I aren't getting along very well right now. You and Daddy can have a great relationship. Just because he and I can't figure it out right now doesn't mean that he doesn't love you, you love him. That's fine. You're not hurting me by that. So I would always encourage parents to allow their kids to love each of the parents.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you, Julie, so much for your time today. It was so wonderful and your energy is beautiful. I'm going to add your website and your email to this podcast for anyone who wants to get a hold of you.
Super.
Anything else before we sign off?
No, I'm going to shut my mouth. I'm going to take my own advice.
Awesome. Well, there you go, guys. I hope this was really helpful. This is Janelle Green here, your relationship coach, and Julie Friedman-Smith, your parenting expert here. Hope this was valuable for you. If you guys have any questions for me or Julie, feel free to get in touch with us. Thank you so much. Bye for now.